Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to a Premier Pundit podcast. It is our FanTeam special as we look ahead to Game Week 24 with our stat guru DJ in the house, Mr. McKenna. You're back again. How are you?
I'm good, Ben. I mean, that's a very big introduction. DJ, I think you mean differential Jason. I call you differential Dinnery as well because you did make some good shouts on last week's discussion. You did quite well in terms of fan team. But yeah, I'm doing all right. I'm coping with this cold weather. But, for us Southerners, this is probably like a warm day for you like up there in Newcastle. I mean, how are you coping with the cold?
Me, I embrace the cold. Like you say, it's like a summer's day in Newcastle. We've hit around about -6, -7. So it is a little bit chilly, but certainly not enough to even think about putting the shorts and the t-shirt away. Still out, ploughing the roads, 5:30, 6 o'clock every morning, getting the job done before everybody wakes up and all manic breaks out.
Are you still able to work out as well? Because a lot of people have been kind of complaining about slipping over, but you are very health conscious. People don't know this about you, but you live the Premier Injuries lifestyle, don't you?
Look, I try to keep me sanity. Look, two young children being locked up with her indoors all day, every day. I need me release. And the only way I can do that is when everybody's still asleep in bed. And it's a challenge. Of course it is. 3 to 4 inches of snow there, but you do what you've got to do to get you through it. And I thoroughly enjoy it. The motivation is just getting out of bed. But once you do that, it doesn't take very long for that cold, brisk air to wake you up. And yeah, I love it, really. I love it.
And when you tumble out of bed, do you remember to put on clothes? Because obviously up there, up north, it's like a warm summer's day for you lot. So, like, are you going out there bollock naked, running through the streets, or do you remember to put on the running clothes?
It's not a pretty sight, like me thinking, running around bollock naked. Look, it's all about the preparation. Look, I have everything laid out every single night in the dark, so I can just pick it up, scoop it up, and I'm out the door. No thinking about it, no messing. Job done, bosh.
You've never then kind of scooped up the Mrs. Knickers or something in that night?
Far too big, mate. Far too big. Anyway, look, man, we are getting sidetracked.
We are indeed. We are indeed.
How did your game week 23 fan team come along?
Yeah, I'm feeling quite good. I came, I think it was 1,000th or something, which doesn't sound amazing, but I was kind of near getting my money back. I was quite happy with it all. And at the moment, as I said last week, I'm kind of happy just learning the ropes here. The best teams. So I entered a couple of teams because I wanted to learn the ropes of kind of what we discussed last week, that I can put in multiple teams, switch it up a little bit. So I actually had two. One team got 58.5 score. Unfortunately, though, I had one player miss out with Martial, so nobody came in for him. Now, we can discuss actually this in a second. My second team got 50 points, and again, I'm not too worried at the moment that I'm not getting in those money positions because I'm learning the ropes here. And like I said, there was a big learning kind of curve here. So what happened with the Martial situation was he was the cheapest Man United forward. And also, we've kind of discussed this before, Ben, that he doesn't start every week. He picks up a knock here and there. But I saw that game as a high ceiling, high potential game. Everton's defence not looking good. And in many senses, I was kind of right. 3 goals conceded, but then Man United did exactly the same. But Martial didn't come on at all. He didn't score any sort of points for me, which was disappointing. But my mistake that I made was I bought Martial as the cheapest Man United forward. So then the game couldn't then sub in one of the other ones because it was too expensive. And I wouldn't have been able to because that would almost kind of cheat the game, wouldn't it? So in the end, I didn't have a starter. So kind of the lesson learned, and this is what kind of the discussions are in the fan team community, is start with the more expensive option. They're more likely to score you points as well. That's why they're more expensive. So this week, a little spoiler for my team, but I will be starting Rashford from the get-go. So I guess I should look at my team for this week then, because there are a few discussions, and obviously as the injury data man, you can kind of allay my concerns or add to them, and maybe I can switch my team up. But looking at my back line now, I'm going to put the team on screen so you can follow along. And I have Pope between the sticks. I'm going to talk to you about him in a second, but I've got Target, Loughton, me and Cresswell. So let's focus on the goalkeeper, because what is the news coming out of Burnley? Because I'm a little bit worried because he might be injured. The good thing is obviously with Pope, he is the most expensive goalkeeper at Burnley. But without him between the sticks, I would be very worried to have my treble up of me and Loughton as well. It kind of all relies on Nick Pope.
Well, the good news is, we heard from Sean Dyche on Thursday afternoon, and Nick Pope has trained along with Jack Cork. So providing that there's no reaction to that problem that kept him out of the FA Cup game midweek, then we would fully expect, Pope to be between the sticks. So it's that, that's good in that respect. The Burnley triple up is something that I looked at. Look, Crystal Palace without Zaha don't win, tend not to score, struggle. They're at a better price point than the Palace defenders, which makes them slightly more appealing. But I was sweet on Burnley last weekend against Brighton, and Brighton got that that first half goal. I watched the second 45. I thought Burnley were excellent. Really, the only concern for me is Sean Dyche hasn't been changing his squad a great deal. They've been carrying injuries, and it's just that those levels of fatigue. And I do like them at the price point. There's got to be a game. Roy Hodgson does have to produce a performance in the absence of Wilfried Zaha at some point. Even if it's just a lucky goal, in off somebody's backside. And maybe it's a little bit of a perfect storm there with the fact that, with elevated levels of fatigue and players maybe not able to, fully focus and concentrate, and, those levels may drop. I'm just thinking maybe Palace could nick a goal. We've seen my guy, Jean-Philippe Mateta, I think they pronounce it, start his first game.
Oh, lovely.
Midweek. Whether he's back in the starting 11 remains to be seen, but it looks like it's going to be between him and Batshuayi alongside Ayew, maybe with Benteke coming off the bench. But look, I do like the Burnley picks. It seems as if I'm seeing this every single week, but it's a tough set of fixtures, and it's difficult to shoehorn in some of those big assets around the price point. So, dipping down into that level at that sort of price makes sense.
Yeah, and looking at the data as well, Burnley are playing a Crystal Palace side that are pretty poor going forward. Through the season, the Eagles have had a very bad attack, and over the last 4 game weeks, the Eagles have 11 shots on target, 3.67 XG, and the lowest shots in the league. So really, I think it's less of a concern when they played Brighton. The thing about Brighton is they actually produce all right attacking data. So it's almost kind of like the Bamford effect at Leeds, that every so often they are going to score a goal because they are just kind of getting those shots in the box, those good numbers. Whereas Crystal Palace aren't, and they've lost the player that does score those rare chances that they do create. And as much as I love your differential Dinnery pick of Jean-Philippe Mateta, I don't think he'll be on the score sheet this week. So actually that kind of makes me happy to hear that Pope is between the sticks. And in terms of Crystal Palace, it's interesting that without Wilfried Zaha, the team have only won 2 of their last 16 games without him in the side. So that makes for good reading for me. And on terms of that Brighton game last week, I felt like both teams wanted to spite us, because I had one team where I had the Burnley defence, and then I had one team with the Brighton defence, both trebled up, and I thought, one of these teams must surely have a clean sheet. And then when both sides scored, I mean, I was right kicking myself. But to be fair, Lewis Dunk did get a header. And in terms of set pieces, Brighton are really good at those sorts of things. So it makes for a easier game week for me, actually, in this Burnley fixture against Crystal Palace. I actually feel more confident on this one than I did against Brighton. Interesting point that we move on to, though, another team in claret, but another team that has injury worries, more so than Burnley, and I'm looking at Aaron Cresswell. I do have him at the moment, but the injury news from the Hammers seems to be almost kind of at what cost did they go through at the FA Cup. They lost a lot of their back line there. That's going to really upset a team that were getting into a healthy groove in terms of defensive and attacking abilities in the Premier League. So again, I do have to ask before we even get onto the stats and the data of why Cresswell is a good pick, but what is the kind of backline going to be looking like for West Ham when they enter this game this weekend?
Good question, Jason. I mean, really good question. The thing is, it's Thursday afternoon. The game doesn't get played until Monday night, which is those extra recovery days will certainly help. But what we know at this point in time, Craig Dawson is the only fully fit senior centre back. Now we'll go through Angelo Ogbonna, ankle injury that was caused in a block tackle shot, stopping a shot. So it looks like there might be a bit of a ligament sprain in there. Thankfully, it doesn't look as serious as first thought, but potentially we're still looking at a number of weeks. His replacement on the night was Issa Diop. He had a clash of heads just before half-time, and he did not resurface in the second half. That brought Ryan Fredericks on. I think he was the first ever concussion substitute introduced into a game. Now, fortunately, it looks as if that was merely a precautionary withdrawal. So he's one player that we could expect into that back line. Elsewhere, Balbuena, he was a possibility as he sat on the bench the other night. However, he felt his calf during the warm-up, a little bit of tightness in there. So again, that one's hanging in the balance, and that depends if he can train. And it also, depends on if Diop is fit, Balbuena will once again take his place on the bench. And we obviously know that with Arthur Masuaku is out. He is back on the training pitches and probably 3 to 4 weeks away from being back in contention. But West Ham do have other issues in and around the pitch as well. I mean, primarily, the big news is Mikel Antonio. And, why do I mention him when we're discussing defensive assets? Well, if you've got somebody up top who can hold the ball up, who can get you that goal, who can ease the pressure, who can allow that back line to push up and move forward, that's huge. You take Mikel Antonio out of that team, who've you got? You may look to Yarmolenko. Well, again, he's picked up a knee injury as well. Potentially his season over, we're waiting to confirm. So that, following the sale of Sebastian Haller, David Moyes doesn't really have anybody with any kind of experience to be able to lead that West Ham front line. There is some suggestion, if Antonio does miss out, that it could be Jess Lingard dropping in that false 9 role. And the dynamics of the whole West Ham, setup just change. So for me, it's one to handle with care, with anybody within that West Ham team.
And this is the big worry, because I love Cresswell. I love the ability that he has to get involved, set piece, assists, and he's created so many chances over the last 6 game weeks. It is fantastic. And of course, he's playing Sheffield United, one of the worst attacks in the Premier League this season. But they're on a bit of an up. West Ham will be on a little bit of a down because of those losses and a huge switch around in formation. So Cresswell is in there at the moment, but what is good about his price range at 9.4 is it means I can easily jump to maybe a Ruben Dias, a John Stones, which obviously Spurs is a difficult game, but we're going to move on to my midfield in a moment or so. I do have Raheem Sterling because I believe Spurs are in a terrible state of flux. They're in one of the worst runs that they've had for quite a long while, arguably worse than the run that saw Pochettino sacked. and they're letting in lots of goals. They're not keeping the clean sheets like they used to at the start of the Mourinho reign. So his premium price point means that I can get in somebody maybe from Manchester City, maybe from Everton. But I think if I was going to go for one of those premium defenders, I'm going to likely gravitate towards Manchester City because they've just been so consistent and that underlying data is there. But I do like that match for West Ham if there wasn't all this furore around the club. Now, the final player that I've got at the back is Matt Targett, 7 mil, Aston Villa asset. And I think he's nicely priced. He is playing that Brighton side that I have mentioned do have a fairly good attack. But Aston Villa's defence, I think, they have had mixed fortunes recently. But the stop out against Arsenal did show their qualities. Martinez has still been on good form. And I think that hopefully Villa see this one out again. They do have that ability. Maybe the kind of time that they've now had since COVID, they're going to get back into their stride and everything. But I've also gone with Matt Targett over Mings and Konsa because Brighton, as I mentioned before, are really good at attacking set pieces, but they're also fantastic at defending them. So in terms of those abilities from Mings and Konsa, where I might put them in a different match, where I might go, right, they're playing a defence that isn't very good at defending set pieces, maybe a Leicester City or somebody like that. This game, I feel like that's not going to be for them. If there is going to be an attack from a defensive asset, it's probably going to be coming from Matty Cash or Targett. And so the price point, again, if Targett is not ready for that game, I don't think there is any injury worries there, but Cash is slightly cheaper than him, so again that kind of plays into the benefit of how the FanTeam works, and it gives me that. But also Matty Targett has had 3 assists so far this season, so I think he is the most likely defender along with Cash, because they're bombing down those wings, because they're kind of passing to those attacking players. That is where the assist might come from. I don't know what your thoughts and feelings are on that one, Ben. Is there a little bit of worry because of Brighton's fantastic form recently?
No, I'm not. Being too led astray by Brighton's, upturn in recent performances. I really do like the fact that you've went Targett over Mings for the reasons that you outlined, because a lot of people might instantly just gravitate towards Ming, thinking from that set piece threat. But when you're putting players up against the likes of Lewis Dunk, big strapping lads who predominantly that's what their bread and butter, then I think you're right. I think that's a really good case that you make for them. Elsewhere, you touched upon Manchester City in hours one. Again, at that price point, that 9 or so million. Ruben Diaz missed out midweek, carrying a bit of a stomach problem, a little bit of illness there. So there are no guarantees on whether he'll be available. But, if he did miss out, it would be John Stones that come in, given the price point. Myself, I went with Cancelo. And I also like, and I can't get away from the fact that, and it's I know the form, and I know probably, but I've went with Trent as well, just because of, again, that price point. I just like him in and around there. I think he's worth a gamble. I certainly by no stretch think that Liverpool are finished. I still think they've got a lot to offer, and Trent and Liverpool are capable of putting a performance up against anybody on any given day. So I've actually managed to shoehorn him in alongside Cedric, with Kieran Tierney remaining on the sidelines.
That is very differential Dinnery, and that's why I love chatting to you, because you kind of come in with these different perspectives. And in terms of our content, I do urge people to listen when it comes out to the Tactic Thursday video that I made with Tristan Thomas. All the teas, we're spilling the tea on Liverpool. And I think one of the interesting things for me with Liverpool might be if they start one or both of those new centre-backs as well. That could really turn things around. They might be able to press more from the front. There is that aerial threat from them as well a little bit. Kabak got 3 goals in the Bundesliga last season from set-piece situations. So I think there could be a turnaround here. And one of the things that we commented on is that Liverpool are doing the right things in set pieces. They're doing the right things defensively, but they just don't have the personnel at the moment. And if one or both of these defenders can jump in, make waves, then that could be brilliant. And they are on the fan team at the moment. It's looking like hopefully one of them starts. It would have been a baptism of fire if they started in that City game. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. So I actually don't hate that shout of Trent Alexander-Arnold when he is there playing with a centre-back that can pass and have that kind of great distribution. He's so good. He is one of the best, if not the best, right attacking defenders in the world. But we shall see. And I like that shout.
What I also like as well is if Kabak was to start, then, alongside Fabinho, for example, then that pushes Jordan Henderson back into that Liverpool midfield.
Exactly.
And for me, he is an integral part. He has his haters. He's not for everybody, but I think within that Liverpool team specifically, in his role, he makes them tick, and he's a big part. I think you see a different Liverpool side when Jordan Henderson is in that centre midfield role.
Yeah, and Fabinho's a great right centre-back. He does a good role. He could play left centre-back as well and kind of have that Van Dijk distribution straight to Trent. He's fine as a centre-back. It is that Henderson role, but also, like you said there, those abilities that Henderson has in the midfield. And again, so that Liverpool can defend on the front foot. That's why they're so good at pressing. And that's not been allowed this season. So we've kind of covered there, and I like your Maverick pick there, Ben, as always. But we're going to move it to the midfield, and I think I've gone with a mix of some Maverick picks and some really easy ones. And the ones that are really easy, like Bruno Fernandes, no explanation needed. He's playing one of the worst teams in the league at the moment. He's playing West Brom. He's going to be my captaincy pick as well. It's just no really need to dive into that one. Now, one of the ones that might be a little bit maverick, I've gone with Raheem Sterling, and I've kind of covered that Tottenham are struggling at the moment. But what is also important to me is that Tottenham played 120 minutes in that FA Cup tie. A lot of those players are going to be physically and mentally fatigued because they're going to be thinking, we're on a terrible run. We played our hearts out for 120 minutes. And now we've not got the FA Cup here. It is a big thing for them, I think, the FA Cup. They were kind of seeing the stars in their eyes of, it's 2021. They're kind of believing the myth that every year with a one in it, they win something. And the only thing that they kind of got left now is it Europa League? They could do. Mourinho is a fantastic manager. I won't take that away from him. But focusing on that game, and kind of looking at the data for Tottenham over the last few weeks, it's not kind of comfortable reading. They're bottom half of the table for goal attempts in the box conceded. They're around Southampton, Crystal Palace, West Brom. That's not the traditional Tottenham that we think of. In terms of XG conceded, again, they're bottom half of the table, 8.15 XG conceded over the last 6 game weeks. And in terms of total goal attempts conceded as well, bottom half, they're allowing a lot of stuff in. It's worrying reading if you're a Tottenham fan. It's worrying reading, but it's good reading if you have somebody like Sterling in your team. And I think this is as good a game as any for Manchester City. They demolished Liverpool. They can probably do the same to Spurs. And what makes it even tastier is the fact that it is at home as well. It is at the Etihad. They've made that a fortress. Etihad has been a fortress, much like Anfield was. I think this is a strong pick, but should I be going with Sterling or should I be going with Gundogan, Ben? That is the big question.
Big question. And again, a decision that we're maybe not able to truly answer at this moment in time. What we've seen in the FA Cup was Rodrigo limp off after taking a knock. Now that obviously with question marks hanging over his availability, you would then switch your attention to maybe Fernandinho coming in and having that holding role. However, Fernandinho missed out midweek due to a bit of tightness and a niggling thigh problem, so there's question marks over his status. Now you could ask whether Pep will then look to maybe deploy Gundogan in that deeper holding role, which maybe limits his attacking sort of prowess and those marauding runs. Or does he look elsewhere? You know, given the form that Gundogan's been in, does he maybe drop somebody like a Phil Foden in there, possibly a little bit of a deeper role? It's just we're going to have to try and maybe read between the lines of Friday's press conference, do a little bit of speculating, but ultimately it's going to be coming down to a judgment call, you know, if he doesn't give us the news that we really want to hear. What I would say on those two players who are doubts, it doesn't look to be anything too serious, but it could have major implications on other players. So, you know, for me, the safer option would be a Sterling, because you know he's going to be playing somewhere in that attacking third, maybe anywhere across that front line. Me personally, I went with Phil Foden. You know, I would never have thought in a million years, if Sergio Aguero was out injured, would Pep drop Gabriel Jesus and put him to the bench? And yet he did against Liverpool, and Phil Foden played in that false nine role. So I've put Phil Foden in for that reason. You know, you're potentially getting an advanced player in a midfield role, but understand it's a little bit of a gamble, and it's one that could change between now, you know, and in deadline.
I don't hate the Phil Foden shout as well, because I think kind of capturing any of those people that are in that Manchester City line is great. And the thing about Gundogan is people kind of brought him in because he's in great form, but then so has Phil Foden been. The only thing that kind of goes against him a little bit is that kind of XG and XGI data. Gundogan and Sterling are kind of top of the Manchester City goal involvements. Gundogan only 4 shots in the box, whereas Sterling has the more with 8. But then Gundogan's kind of XGI is obviously inflated by the fact that he is on the penalties, whereas Sterling's have kind of come from open play, which...
Or is he, Jason? Sorry to interject, but is he on penalties?
This is a really good question.
We might see the first goalkeeper, you know, take a penalty in the Premier League ever. Oh. If City are awarded one at the weekend, and Edison is the new nominated spot kicker. Just putting that out there, my friend. Just putting it out there.
I mean, that brings in a totally different kind of conversation. Should I be putting in Edison instead of Pope? The ability to have a scoring goalkeeper would be ridiculously delicious. I think everybody would be licking their lips each game week, just kind of seeing somebody take a tumble in the box for Manchester City. I think at the moment, Pep has said this before, and then he kind of rescinded that comment like a week or two later. I think it might have been the Centurion season when he kind of said Edison can take penalties, and then he said a few days later, look, we need an outfield player to secure these kind of situations. I'd like to see it. I don't think I've got the kahunas to gamble on it, because I like the Pope, and also it works well for my team that he's 2 million less. But maybe we'll keep an eye on that situation as well. Could be a fun one, and maybe something that people maybe should take a gamble on, because I think the likelihood of Manchester City keeping a clean sheet is very high, even with the talent that Tottenham have and the fact that Kane is back. This is like a different beast, isn't it? Man City are just doing so well this season. But I love that you brought up the Edison penalty shout, and that could be brilliant to kind of see it. Imagine if he took it like Panenka style as well, just the audaciousness of him. Now, I've gone with Jack Grealish, and the weird thing for me is a lot of people have kind of been critical of him recently. They've said a lot of negative things about him. They said that he's, you know, not contributing enough, and this and that. And I get that there's been like a little bit of downturn over the last 6 game weeks, as his XGI isn't as high as it has been, but he's still creating lots of chances. And the interesting thing for me is this Aston Villa team is still fantastic going forward. The Brighton team are a bit better defensively, and this might be another one that we look at Tactic Thursdays. But the thing is I think how brilliant Jack Grealish is. 14 chances created in the last 4 game weeks. He has an XA of 0.74. I think he's still a fine kind of fit, and kind of like with the discussion of Zaha at Crystal Palace. Normally when Aston Villa score, it's Grealish involved in somehow. He either is scoring them or assisting, and I think he's got 4 returns in his last 5 game weeks as well. For me, that's not a bad return at all. If somebody's scoring, 80% of the time, this Brighton fixture might give some difficulties because of a slight improvement in the quality of their defence. But I think Grealish is so good that I shouldn't be too worried about that one. But at his price point, Ben, should I be looking elsewhere? Is there kind of another midfielder that maybe I should be turning my attention to?
I'm not sure about whether you should, but I will throw my 10 pence worth in to the discussion, as I always do, because for those who have never followed us before or heard this podcast, they know that we don't have any pre-podcast discussions around lineups. Jason doesn't tell me who he's looking to pick, so when we see the team sheet, as it were, it comes as a total surprise, and it's very interesting to see our different thought processes and patterns. And my midfield is completely different to yours. I've touched upon Foden, but others, and I recognise mine is much more of a punty midfield, and it is dependent upon maybe certain things happening. I've went with Nicolas Pepe. I know, and it's something that I would never have entertained really ever. But I think in terms of his Arsenal career, he's maybe just starting to show little glimpses of what he's capable of. I'm not saying he's anywhere near to living up to that price tag, but he's certainly improving, and he deserves his place in that Arsenal starting 11. Question marks whether he may or may not start. I do have the safety net. I think it would be maybe Ceballos or somebody would come in behind him. The concerns is we've had Aubameyang who's on the bench, and Aubameyang has been there, so I do expect Mikel Arteta to bring him in. If it was me, I would put Aubameyang up front, and I would actually drop Lacazette, and I would keep Nicolas Pepe on the left with Saka on the right, and I would still start Smith Rowe in behind. So that's why I went with Pepe. Elsewhere, I've took another punt. I've done it last week with Jess Lingard, and it's exactly the same thought process as to and rationale as to why he's a player that wants to go out and prove himself. He's been at Liverpool for a while. He's been in the shadows. He's got people questioning his ability. He's going to be coming, and he'll have lots of energy. He'll want to prove his critics wrong. Scored a great goal at St James's Park. It will be a tough game against Wolves, but he's cup tied in the FA Cup midweek, so he'll be fully refreshed. And so he's one I've thrown into the mix. And the third option that I'm looking at is James Rodriguez. And that's, I looked at that. Again, he was rested midweek as a precaution. Came off at Old Trafford due to a bit of tightness in his calf. But it's almost certain that DCL is going to be out with a hamstring problem. Now, in his absence last time, Carlo Ancelotti did switch to a 4-4-2, and James Rodriguez played in that advanced role as a striker. So again, I'm maybe looking for a little bit more bang for me buck with that, and that's why sort of James Rodriguez is thrown back in there. But what I would stress is it is Thursday. We still have press conferences to come, Everton being one of those on Friday. So it's not locked in, but, that's the route that I'm heading down at this moment in time.
It is difficult. And I like some of those picks. I mean, the Arsenal situation, it seems to be ever changing. A couple of weeks ago, we were talking about the fact that they were looking good going forward. And then they have had a bit of a hiccup. They've had a slip up. But this is a Leeds defence that is incredibly open and lets in lots of chances. So Pepe as a shout. It's hard because you don't know which of the Arsenal players are going to start at the moment. Is it going to be Lacazette? Is it going to be Aubameyang? If Lacazette is on the left, he's less appealing. If he's through the middle, then he's a really good own. But there's also that thing, I think, with your price point, it would be Emil Smith Rowe coming into the team at 10.8. I think he's a decent own, because he's been creating a lot of chances, good attacking ability. The thing is, maybe it's because I watch them week in, week out as an Arsenal fan. I just got this reluctance to kind of invest in them, because as soon as they seem to be turning the corner, as soon as I feel like, I can believe in them again, they suddenly lose 2 games on the bounce. And it does have those worries there. And for me, I think Leeds are such a high quality attacking side that they're going to really cause problems. The high energy, their organisation, whereas Arsenal still kind of week to week are unsure, and there's the big losses of individuals like Tierney as well. He's so integral to the function of that back line, but then Gabriel might be back, Rob Holding might be in there, so I really don't know. It's a difficult one with them. It's very hard to kind of justify any involvement. And with Everton, they scored 3 last week, so you can't really say too much there. But they're still not producing great data, and that just makes me avoid them at the moment. But a bit like Aston Villa with Grealish, a bit like Zaha with Crystal Palace, when the goals are coming at Everton, James Rodriguez is so good that he is the architect. He is the one kind of getting involved there. They're just maybe all too high risk for me, but that's why you're kind of differential punty Dinnery, whereas I'm kind of using the data to guide me, maybe a little bit too much. Maybe I'm using it as a guide and it's leading me down the wrong path, the darkened path, and not a good one. But in terms of it, you've mentioned the Wolves Southampton game, and I've gone to the other side. I've gone Neto. I think that over the last couple of game weeks, I've kind of seen that he's been so involved with their attack. 2.7 XGI over the last 6 game weeks. He's Wolves' biggest threat. And I feel like Southampton still have those problems. There's still going to be that psychological hang-up there from the fact that they were trounced so badly. Wolves aren't a great side going forward this season, but Willian Jose seems to have really settled into that position. They seem to be kind of going back to their roots almost of a big man up front. They're kind of getting those crosses in. So I feel like this is kind of a turnaround. And for playing against Southampton as well, this kind of comes at the right time for them to be able to almost have that bounce back. I don't know what your thoughts and feelings on Neto are.
I feel like I've been burned by Neto on too many occasions to have any real confidence in putting him in my side at the moment. He's, as it stands, he's not starting in the FA Cup game against Southampton on Thursday night, which is good. I always like to see that. But how many conversations have we had about Wolves and this conservative approach to their style of play? Maybe that will change slightly with the reintroduction of Johnny. But what I would stress, long-term serious knee injury, it's a return to play is not a return to performance. So don't expect the guy to be pulling up trees, in these first few games back. He will be managed. And I'm not even convinced that Nuno will, although he started him last weekend, I'm not sure he'll start him this. We've seen Ike Nouri, who's back in contention after recovering from a groin injury. And we also have Roman Siat back into that Wolves squad as well. So he can, there's a couple of options down there on the left-hand side. I'm just not 100% comfortable with Wolves. I still, he changes from a 3-4-3 to a 3-5-2. He's even went to a 4-2-3-1. I like William Jose. He looks promising. I think he needs to get that, just that monkey off his back, get that goals and really sort of settle into his style of play. It's going to take a period of adjustment. Wolves really don't have that luxury at this moment in time, and I just think the pressure on there is just being ramped up. So it's hard to get excited about Neto, but in the absence of say Prudence, he's at least guaranteed minutes in a start, I would say. So in that respect, he's a decent pick.
At the price point in terms of the fan team picks for midfielders, he looked the most enticing for me because I like to balance my team elsewhere. The worry that you've expressed kind of about Wolves going forward is reflected in the data as well. It does worry me as well. I kind of look at it, they've not been great going forward. The other option around that price point is actually quite a maverick one. Ross Barkley. I mean, he could be a better pick than Punty Pedro. The wonderful thing about FanTeam, though, is you can have multiple entries. So I might put him in another team. I might put somebody else in just because that gives me that leeway. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about FanTeam is I could have Pedro in this team. I could put Barkley. I could put somebody else. I could have a really big restructure so that I don't kind of come to the end of the game week and go, God, I wish I'd put Barkley into my team. Well, I can do that and just switch my team up a little bit and have him in there. So that's the positive thing about this kind of discussion, as well as, you know, you pointed out there your reservations. I have them as well. I think it's a good time to play Southampton, but then Barkley arguably has a better fixture and a better attack and is priced about the same. So these are all legitimate discussions. So the final midfielder that I have to talk about is Rafinha. He's somebody that you've liked for a little while, Ben. I like his underlying data. I like the Leeds team. There's just a lot to like about him. And I think the biggest thing that you'll like about him is he's not called Bamford. So it's that way into the Leeds team, the Bielsa boys, without having Bamford in. And I feel like this week I've done you well. I haven't offended you like I did last week, where you almost disowned me for having... Who was it? Was it Bamford, Wilson? Who else had I in my team that just offended you to your core?
Was it not Sterling? I mean,
I think it was Sterling
as
well.
I've always got a baby bonnet over Raheem Sterling. I mean, just stress, none of these are personal picks. I've been burned so many times in the past by them that I just have this, this main fault where I can't bring them into my team, and I refuse to. Now, I'm a stubborn Torian, so what can I say? But I'm true to our saying.
The thing with Rafinha is he has actually the highest XGI of any Leeds player over the last 6. So even from a data perspective, he's the one with the most potential threat. He's always involved with the attacks. And we kind of mentioned it earlier, but I think this is kind of a good time to play the Arsenal team because they have been depleted by injuries, suspensions. I think Tierney is a big loss there. What do you think about that kind of the fact that Arsenal do have these problems, especially with the goalkeeper? They don't have the first pick in there. Is this a great time to have a Leeds asset playing them?
Well, I mean, Louise and Leno are both returning to the Arsenal squad this weekend.
Oh, okay.
So that but you are tempering my enthusiasm for getting anybody from the Gunners. So I might need to reevaluate that. Although, do you know what? I'm still not convinced by Leeds either, if the truth be known. I know that they got a decent result last weekend. They will run teams into the ground, but I think this is such an Arsenal game where people will look at it and think that it's difficult. I can see them losing, and for me, Arsenal could put a performance in and beat them 2 or 3-0. I really, really do believe that. And when we're looking for differentials, when we're looking at, if there's going to be a lot of people steaming into Leeds assets, quite rightly based on the data, then some of these Arsenal picks may just go underneath the radar. And you tend to see, those teams that do quite well, those players that are high, up high on that leaderboard, they've got a few decent differential picks in there. And like I say, I'm willing to take a gamble on a couple of those Arsenal players.
I feel that this is just looking at the data, but maybe I'm focusing too much. For me, the worry is that Arsenal, they've only had 4 goals in their last 6. Leeds have had 8, higher XG, way more shots in the box. But again, this is a different Arsenal. I do have to admit that they are much better defensively, and Mikel Arteta, after a couple of difficult games, bad results, might come out and just kind of say to the guys, look, let's steady the ship, let's get a solid result in here. But I can't see there not being a goal scored by Leeds. They're so good at it, and I feel, especially if David Luiz does play, there's always a mistake in him. He's so poor, and I don't like him. I don't know if you've got differing opinions on big David Luiz, but I don't know if you want to interject there with an opinion on David Luiz that kind of.
I must admit, I prefer him higher up the pitch. I prefer away from the goal as a defensive midfielder. I think that's a great role for him. But I'm not, I look at Rob Holding. I think he's overrated. I think, no.
Yeah.
Gabriel, I'm not convinced by Gabriel, even. Callum Chambers. So, it's slim pickings in that Arsenal backline. David Luiz is one of those, he's almost like, the old PlayStation defenders. He's just playing around all over, pinging the passes. He's capable of having a worldie, but he's more than you would expect a Titus Bramble moment in his game.
Exactly.
He's littered with mistakes and errors. And would he be may pick in other formats? No. But is he somebody that comes on the radar and FanTeam on any given game week? Then certainly he is, because he does bring a lot more to the party than just potentially defensive returns.
Yeah. That is the foible of him, is that he does have that ability to maybe get an assist. He is on some of the set pieces. I think he is my Bamford that I can never actually sing his praises, just how many times he's burned my Arsenal team. I've never had him in fantasy football for obvious reasons. The final pick up front is Rashford, and even though Martial and Cavani have the higher data, more shots in the box, higher XGI, I don't want to be burned this week by not having a starting Manchester United striker. So I've got him in there. He's always playing, and this is something that you said, I think, last week, Ben, that even if he does have a knock or a niggle, you can expect Rashford in that lineup. He's so hardy, and he's so important to that Manchester United team. So that's the reasoning behind it. I think Manchester United are one of the favourites to have a high-scoring weekend. Hopefully Rashford will be involved, but you know yourself from captaining him all season in Fantasy Premier League that he does frustrate quite a bit. So I think at his price point as well, he's fairly well priced. I quite liked him at the 13.8. It kind of confused me that Timo Werner was actually priced a little bit higher. I think it's got to be Rashford as one of the favourites for this game week. But your pick was possibly Aubameyang. Is that what you're saying? Maybe Aubameyang over Rashford for this week?
No. I mean, I think Aubameyang may come in. I did look at Timo Werner, as it happened. Struggling with a little bit of a dead leg, so may or may not feature in the FA Cup. If he does miss out, I would certainly expect him to come back on Monday. But at 14 plus million, I just couldn't justify the outlay, given the fact that he is still a little bit of a gamble. There is a risk there in involving him. So the two players that I looked at, and I went with a 4-4-2. I mean, we don't often see a 4-5-1 in this game, but the two that I went for was Ollie Watkins, for the exact reasons that we've talked about, Ross Barkley and Jack Grealish going into this fixture. And somebody who again, you've tempered me enthusiasm a little bit, but Richarlison. Everton seem to be, I just feel as if, I know the data doesn't support Everton. I think that data is going to catch up. I was happy to lump on DCL. I had a feeling that, things were on an upturn, and that proved to be a decent decision. And, in his absence, we presume, I think, the likes of maybe Rodriguez and Richarlison will benefit, although, quite rightly, after that extra time period, midweek, that may have an impact on it, and that may I might decide, maybe just to go for the one Everton asset as opposed to two. We just have to wait and see. But Fulham, again, it's based on Fulham because I was fairly optimistic that Fulham seem to be finding their feet and could put a really decent run together. But the last two, 3 games, I know they had a 0-0 draw recently, but they have struggled. They need wins on the board, and it should be an open game. And for me, that will suit Everton. Fulham need to get 3 points. There's no point in getting draws these days with Sheffield United, putting the odd victory together. So on fixture, I think I like Everton and Richarlison and Rodriguez are the two that I'm looking at.
Yeah, that is interesting point about Everton, and obviously if you are going to invest in their top line, Richarlison does look good for this week. Fulham's defence has been leaky. It hasn't been great recently, and they're going to be chasing the result there. So I understand the shout. I have this reluctancy, but maybe I don't see the puntiness. But in terms of the team, that wraps up my team. I hope that helps you with your fan teams, and do make sure to get involved. You can pick one or more teams, and that's what I'll be doing this week. I'll probably have a couple to spread my bet. But is there anything else that you wanted to bring up before we wrap up, Ben?
Yeah, so of course, just before we go, like to mention last week's head-to-head, where I put all my eggs in the red corner with Mo Salah, whereas you opted for the blue corner in Raheem Sterling. Would you like to tell our fans of FanTeam how well we've done and who is 1-0 up in our head-to-head game so far?
It seems like a boxing match. In the red corner and in the blue corner. But it's the boxing match where, I don't feel happy with the result. I did win, but so Sterling got 9 points. Mo Salah got 7. So I do win that round. Ding, ding. But, this is kind of like Tyson...
Din, din.
Din Din, Din Din against Din Din. The thing is, this is kind of like Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder. We're going to be having a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth. Probably they'll have that fight till they're in the grave, Then it might be their ghosts fight one another. But in terms of us, we're going to be doing this throughout the season where we go head to head on one discussion point. So I've kind of gone with... a discussion point this week of Burnley keeping a clean sheet. So I'm going with a clean sheet, but are you going to kind of go on the other side of the bet and say that they're going to lose and maybe Crystal Palace outscore them this week?
I'm not sure about outscoring, but I just think the tide has got to turn at some point. Palace have got to get a result without Wilfried Zaha. So I will happily take the bet that Crystal Palace will score a goal against the Clarets at Selhurst Park in Gameweek 24.
You'll be hoping that it's Jean-Philippe Mateta as well on the score sheet, but as long as you get the win, you'll probably be happy, won't you?
Wait, you say Mateta, I say Matata. Let's call the whole thing off.
I love that. That is brilliant. But that's a brilliant note to end on as well, Ben. As always, we wish people good luck with their teams, and make sure to like, subscribe and share with your friends, because we've got so much good content. We've got Raj, the fantasy doctor, who explains the story behind the story of why a player's injured and why they might be back sooner than you think, or they might be out longer than the papers will let you know. We do have the incumbent Tactic Thursdays to look forward to. We have our usual Fantasy Premier League analysis, and we've also got the fascinating insights again behind the scenes with Lee Taylor. But for now, as always, thank you for tuning in, and we will be back next week for the next game week analysis.
Yeah, thanks guys. Another brilliant podcast, Jason. Much appreciated. And yeah, good luck everyone. Hope you win the big one, or if not, maybe I could win it this week. Fingers crossed. But until the next time, see you all again soon. Ciao for now.
Ciao for now.